Welcome back to Shipfaced, everybody, to Season 10, The Sinking of the Andrea Doria. For this fabulous model of the Andrea Doria, or other ships, check out the link in my description to the Etsy shop The Roller 3D Model Company. Where we last left off, the Archbishop was involved in the naming ceremony of the Andrea Doria. It was a glittering social event, tons of streamers were thrown into the air, and everybody was cheering as the massive Italian vessel slid down the slipway and touched water for the first time. Soon after, the Doria began what turned into be a very successful career. She was the most beautiful, the largest, and regarded by many to be the safest Italian ocean liner since World War II. Unlike most ocean liners, Andrea Doria had 3 exterior pools, one for each class. She also had a theater, many bars, high-class society restaurants, and was loved by all who sailed on her. By 1956, however, some 4 years into her service, fate came knocking at the door. On July 25th, 1956, Andrea Doria was heading west, bound for New York, approaching the east coast of Nantucket. Meanwhile, not far away, the Swedish-American line passenger vessel Stockholm was headed east from New York. The fog thickened, the crew misread their radar on both vessels, and in the very last minute, the crew of the Andrea Doria on their starboard bow saw the Stockholm approaching. Both vessels attempted to turn out of the other one's way, but they were too close, and Stockholm struck. The enormous wound in the side of Andrea Doria allowed thousands of tons of seawater to flood her compartments and her passenger decks. As a result, half of Andrea Doria's lifeboats were rendered completely useless as they were physically unable to be lowered over the hull. Meanwhile, the Stockholm stayed around to pick up as many survivors as they safely could, and then, under her own power, sailed back to New York for repairs, which I find astonishing. Despite how long Andrea Doria would eventually take to fully sink, this did not do anything to minimize panic. The passengers that were uprooted from their lives as the ship keeled over to her starboard side were torn from their families. There was a lot of confusion, and with the sudden disappearance of the Stockholm, it seemed as though no one was coming for help. A handful of small craft and smaller passenger vessels did come, but the most they could bring on was a couple hundred compared to the 1,200 in the sea. 44 nautical miles away was the French line's Ile-de-France. Upon receiving Andrea Doria's SOS call, the Ile-de-France changed course and 3 hours later arrived on the scene. The moment she arrived at the scene and lit all of her exterior lights to let the Andrea Doria passengers know help had come, all the fog lifted. And this was an emotionally very powerful imagery for the people to see that hope had arrived. The Ile-de-France managed to rescue the bulk of the remaining passengers by shuttling her 10 lifeboats back and forth from the Andrea Doria, receiving loads upon loads of those from the other ships that had already arrived at the scene. As I mentioned earlier, Andrea Doria took about 11 hours to sink and was the first shipwreck to be caught on camera. So there you have it, folks. That's the story of the Andrea Doria in a nutshell. Let me know in the comments what you think. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and thank you for watching.